Good afternoon and welcome to our press conference with President Lagarde and Vice President de Guindos. My name is Wolfgang Preußel. We have participants that are online. If they take the floor, please turn on your cameras and your microphones. And with that, I hand over to President Lagarde, please.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang, and good afternoon, good morning to all of you. The Vice President and I are pleased to welcome you to our press conference. The Governing Council today decided to keep the three key ECB interest rates unchanged. Our updated assessment reconfirms that inflation should stabilize at our 2% target in the medium term. The new Eurosystem staff projections show headline inflation averaging 2.1% in 25, 1.9% in 26, 1.8% in 28, 1.8% in 27, and 2% in 28. For inflation excluding energy and food, staff project an average of 2.4% in 25, 2.2% in 26, 1.9% in 27, and 2% in 28. Inflation has been revised up for 2026, mainly because staff now expects services inflation to decline more slowly. Economic growth is expected to be stronger than in the September projections, driven especially by domestic demand. Growth has been revised up to 1.4% in 25, 1.2% in 2026, and 1.4% in 2027, and is expected to remain at 1.4% in 2028. We are determined to ensure that inflation stabilizes at our 2% target in the medium term. We will follow a data-dependent and meeting-by-meeting approach to determining the appropriate monetary policy stance. In particular, our interest rate decisions will be based on our assessment of the inflation outlook and the risks surrounding it, in light of the incoming economic and financial data, as well as the dynamics of underlying inflation and the strength of monetary policy transmission. We are not pre-committing to a particular rate path. The decisions taken today are set out in a press release that is available on our website. I will now outline in more details how we see the economy and inflation developing, and will then explain our assessment of financial monetary conditions. Looking at the economic activity, the economy has been resilient. It grew by 0.3% in the third quarter, mainly reflecting stronger consumption and investment. Exports also increased, with a significant contribution from chemicals. The sectoral composition of growth was dominated by services, especially in the information and communication sector, while activity in industry and construction remained flat. The pattern of services-led growth is likely to continue in the near term. The economy is benefiting from a robust labor market, unemployment at 6.4% in October is close to its historical low, and employment grew by 0.2% in the third quarter. At the same time, labor demand cooled further, with the job vacancy rate at its lowest level since the pandemic. The staff projections see domestic demand as the main engine of growth in the years ahead. Real incomes are set to rise further, and the saving rate should gradually come down from its still high level, supporting consumption. Business investment and substantial government spending on infrastructure and defense should increasingly underpin the economy. However, the challenging environment for global trade is likely to remain a drag on growth in the euro area this year and next. The Governing Council stresses the urgent need to strengthen the euro area and its economy in the present geopolitical context. We welcome the European Commission's call for governments to prioritize sustainable public finance, strategic investment, and growth-enhancing structural reforms. Unlocking the full potential of the single market is crucial. It is also vital to foster further capital market integration by completing the Savings and Investments Union and the Banking Union to an ambitious timetable, and to rapidly adopt the regulation on the establishment of the digital euro. Looking now at inflation. Annual inflation has been in a narrow range since the spring and remained at 2.1% in November. Energy prices were 0.5% lower than a year ago, after a larger decline in October. Food price inflation was 2.4% after 2.5% in October and 3% in September. Inflation excluding energy and food was steady at 2.4%, as goods and services inflation moved in opposite directions. Goods inflation declined to 0.5% in November, from 0.6% in October and 0.8% in September. Services inflation rose to 3.4% in October and 3.5% in November, from a 3.2% in September. Indicators of underlying inflation have changed little over the recent months and remain consistent with our 2% medium-term target. While growth in unit profits was unchanged in the third quarter, unit labor costs grew at a slightly higher rate than in the second quarter. Compensation per employee rose at an annual rate of 4%. This was more than expected in the September staff projections and was due to payments over and above negotiated wages. Forward-looking indicators such as the ECB wage tracker and surveys on wage expectations suggest that wage growth will ease in the coming quarters before stabilizing somewhat below 3% towards the end of 2026. Inflation should decline in the near term, mostly because past energy price rises will drop out of the annual rates. Staff expects it to stay below 2% on average in 26 and 27, with energy inflation negative over most of this period, and inflation excluding energy gradually declining. Inflation should then return to target in 28 amid a strong rise in energy inflation. This, in part, reflects the upward effect on inflation of the EU emissions trading system 2, which is now expected to start in 2028, a year later than assumed in the September staff projections. Inflation excluding energy is projected to stabilize at around 2% in the final years of the projection horizon. Most measures of longer-term inflation expectations continue to stand at around 2%, supporting the stabilization of inflation around our target. Let's look at the risk assessment. While trade tensions have eased, the still volatile international environment could disrupt supply chains, dampen exports, and weigh on consumption and investment. A deterioration in global financial market sentiment could lead to tighter financing conditions, greater risk aversion, and weaker growth. Geopolitical tensions, in particular Russia's unjustified war against Ukraine, remain a major source of uncertainty. By contrast, planned defense and infrastructure spending, together with productivity-enhancing reforms, may drive up growth by more than expected. An improvement in confidence could stimulate private spending. The outlook for inflation continues to be more uncertain than usual on account of the still volatile international environment. Inflation could turn out to be lower if the rise in US tariffs reduces demand for euro area exports, and if countries with overcapacity increase their exports to the euro area. Moreover, a stronger euro could bring inflation down further than expected. An increase in volatility and risk aversion in financial markets could weigh on demand and thereby also lower inflation. By contrast, inflation could turn out to be higher if more fragmented global supply chains pushed up import prices, curtailed the supply of critical raw materials, and added to capacity constraints in the euro area economy. A slower reduction in wage pressures could delay the decline in services inflation. A boost in defense and infrastructure spending could also raise inflation over the medium term. And extreme weather events and the unfolding climate and nature crisis more broadly could drive up food prices by more than expected. Turning now to the financial and monetary conditions. Market rates have increased since our last meeting. Bank lending rates for firms have been broadly stable since the summer, after falling in response to our policy rate cuts over the previous years. In October, they stood at 3.5%, unchanged from September. The cost of issuing market-based debt was 3.4%, also close to its September level. And the average interest rate on new mortgages, again, held steady at 3.3% in October. Bank lending to firms grew by 2.9% on a yearly basis in October, unchanged from September. Corporate bond issuance rose by 3.2%, broadly unchanged as well. Mortgage lending strengthened, growing by 2.8% after 2.6% in September. In line with our monetary policy strategy, the Governing Council thoroughly assessed the links between monetary policy and financial stability. Euro area banks are resilient, supported by strong capital and liquidity ratios, solid asset quality, and robust profitability. But geopolitical uncertainty and the possibility of a sudden repricing in global financial markets pose risks to financial stability in the euro area. Macroprudential policy remains the first line of defense against the build-up of financial vulnerabilities, enhancing resilience and preserving macroprudential space. So in conclusion, the Governing Council today decided to keep the 3 key ECB interest rates unchanged. We are determined to ensure that inflation stabilizes at our 2% target in the medium term. We will follow a data-dependent and meeting-by-meeting approach to determining the appropriate monetary policy stance. Our interest rate decisions will be based on our assessment of the inflation outlook and the risks surrounding it, in light of the incoming economic and financial data, as well as the dynamics of underlying inflation and the strength of monetary policy transmission. We are not pre-committing to a particular rate path. In any case, we stand ready to adjust all of our instruments within our mandate to ensure that inflation stabilizes sustainably at our medium-term target and to preserve the smooth functioning of monetary policy transmission. And we are now ready to take your questions.
And today the first question goes to Balázs Korányi of Reuters. Balázs, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Two questions, President Lagarde. The first one is about interest rates, and the question is, are we still in a good place? Whenever the interest rate moves next time, is it more likely to go up or down? Do you have clarity on that? Second question is about economic growth, given your second straight fairly large revision in the growth outlook. Is this just simply resilience to uncertainty, or should we be rethinking our entire assessment of the growth profile? Are we catching perhaps a windfall from the AI boom? Are firms more resilient and adapting to the new reality better? Is there some fundamental change about growth, or is it just a one-off improvement?
Well, thank you very much for your two questions. I'll try to unpack because there's a lot there. On interest rate, we reconfirmed that we are in a good place, which does not mean that we are static. There was a unanimous decision that was taken today concerning the rates that we decided to hold, but there was also a unanimous view that all optionalities should remain on the table, and that we would stick to the meeting-by-meeting, data-dependent approach with no rate path set and no set date for any move. And it was a unanimous view around the table. So I think that addresses your first question. Your second question is always an interesting question from you, but it's an interesting question because it raises issues that we will probably review in deeper details at our February projection next exercise, because we will also be looking at the surveillance report that we produce. We will be looking at the fiscal monitor. We might look also at the supply side review to go a bit deeper in some of the facts that would answer your question. We think that there is some change taking place in our economies. And if you look in particular at the drivers and what has surprised us on the upside, it's characteristically investment. And it's not just spending by the public sector, which there is, but it's also the private sector, the corporate sector, both large corporates, but also SMEs as well. And their investment, based on the data that we collect, based on the surveys that we conduct, is largely attributable to the development of AI. And AI takes multifacets, but certainly computer capacity, telecommunication, additional investment in intangible, more than tangible capex is really characteristic of what we are seeing at the moment. So that is something that we can already analyze, but I think we will be able to go a bit deeper in February, as we will see a bit of a longer interval to determine whether that's a long-lasting fact that is characteristic of this new growth. But that is clearly in play. The second one, which came as a bit of a surprise to us, is the contribution of exports. we had anticipated that exports, particularly out of the chemical industry and out of Ireland notably, but not only, would really correspond to a build-up of inventory and to a front-loading in the early months after the decision to increase tariff or pre-decision to increase tariff. Well, that has been sustainable. And the contribution of exports has surprised us on the upside. So we don't know whether it's entirely attributable to the weight-losing drugs that are largely exported or to other phenomenon, but the contribution of export has surprised on the upside, when in fact we believe that trade is more likely as a result of tariffs to be a drag on growth going forward. So that's also something that we will be attentive to. Thank you.
And the next question goes to Annette Weisbach of CNBC, please. Annette.
Thank you very much. President Lagarde, I have a question as well, going back to Isabel Schnabel's comment on the rate hike. Are you as comfortable with how the market is pricing in the current rate expectation as she is? Second question is on the fiscal stimulus in Germany. We were waiting for that for this year. Now there's hope it comes next year. What is your assessment, what it does as well to other countries in your area when it comes to the growth outlook for the whole? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your two questions. You know, certain things have changed and others have not changed. So when we look at activity, we have upgraded our projections. They've moved to the upside across the projection period. When we look at inflation, we've also increased our inflation projection for 26, and we have taken into account the movement from 27 to 28. So there are lots of things that have moved in that respect. One thing that has not changed much at all, and which, if anything, may have actually worsened, is uncertainty. And uncertainty is not a comfortable position. So I think we all suffer from that degree of lack of comfort. And we are all attentive to uncertainty, how it pans out, whether it's uncertainty related to geopolitics, whether it's uncertainty related to the movement of trade from countries with overcapacity in particular, what happens at the borders of Europe. So there are lots of factors that are in play and that will evolve over the course of 26 that are generating uncertainty. And as far as the future is concerned, as I told your colleague just earlier on, there was unanimous agreement around the table about the fact that all optionalities should be on the table and that we should stick to the meeting-by-meeting approach, to the data dependency, and we will be looking at all sorts of data in the field of wages, salaries, the decomposition of it. We will be particularly attentive because it plays a significant role in relation to services. And we do not have a set path for our rates going forward. I know this is, everybody would like some forward guidance, but we simply, in the current situation, with the degree of uncertainty that we are facing, we simply cannot offer forward guidance. Now, your second question related to government spending, public investment, and you know, we take into account the documents that are filed by the various member states with the Commission to review the path of investments going forward. And we have an impact on growth for certain countries, you know, Germany being, you know, obviously one, in 26, in 27, and still a bit in 28. And so much can change in the meantime. But it does have an impact, and it is a driver of growth in the investment section that I was describing earlier.
And the next question goes to Mark Schroers of Bloomberg. Mark, please.
Yes, thanks a lot. The first one, unfortunately, also on rates. The discussion today, was there
That's
any...
what we decided today, so you're right.
That's right. Okay, perfect. Was there any discussion about a cut today or about hikes today, just to have more clarity on the discussions today?
I don't have to wait for your second question. The answer is no.
Okay. The second question is on the revamp of the executive board over the next 2 years.
Revamp, you say?
The revamp, right. That also includes your role in 2027. I know it's a long time off, to be honest, but there's already a discussion in Germany whether it's time for Germany to become the ECB president. And just wanted to know if you think that it would be good after 25 years of the institution if a national from the largest euro area member states would become the ECB president. And as you already publicly said that Klaas Knot would be a good candidate. What do you think about Isabel Schnabel and Joachim Nagel, who both recently...
Okay, well, let me
signaled some
clarify
interest?
one thing. I don't have any favorite candidate, and I did not say that Klaas Knot was the good candidate. There are plenty of very good candidates, and Isabel is one of them, but there are plenty of them, and I'm sure that there will be more in the future. Why not? I find it terribly satisfactory, in a way, that so many people want to have my job. It's a great job. And it's one when you feel that you can actually matter and affect the life of people and try to deliver for the European Union and for our currency, the euro. But as to who it is, what nationality, it's not, I'll have nothing to say about that. It will be for the European Council, and the decision will be made outside this beautiful institution. So, whatever they decide. But thank you. You have still a long time to ask all those questions, huh? Phew.
Next question goes to Aude Kersulik of BFM Business.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mrs. Lagarde. The euro's nominal effective exchange rate is at record levels. I know it's not a part of your mandate, but has this point been discussed by the Governing Council? And second question, still regarding to currency, how do you balance the benefits of a strong euro for import prices, good for your mandate, with the risk of greater exposure to China, which is an important issue for Europe at the moment? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question. I might give you the answer that you expect, which is that we do not target exchange rate. And we do refer to exchange rate in the risk section of our monetary policy statement, if I recall, when we refer to a possible higher exchange, an appreciation of the euro. So I'll refer you to that section in the risk segment of the monetary policy statement. And obviously it is something that we look at carefully as we look at the way in which currencies are positioned around the world. And obviously the current situation of the renminbi is one that we pay attention to, yes.
Next question goes to Olaf Storbeck of the Financial Times. Olaf, please.
Thanks for taking my questions. I have one question on inflation. The higher inflation in 26 was justified or explained with higher services inflation. It's gone up to 3.5 in whatever it was, November, up for and it was on an upwards trajectory in the past few months. How concerned are you about service inflation overall? Could this be kind of turn into a nasty surprise? And my second question again is on ECB succession. One of the sitting members of the executive board has basically showed interest in becoming your successor. What's your reading on the law in terms of, is it possible legally to appoint a sitting member of the executive council as ECB president? Because as far as I understand it, it clearly says terms are non-renewable. And would that be in line with the law and also in line with the spirit of that rule, which I think is intended to kind of prevent governing council members or executive board members to kind of jostle for their next job in their current job? Thanks.
Thank you for your two questions. On your first question, thank you for focusing on inflation on services, because it's clearly one domain that we will be attentive to going forward. So you are right that service inflation has increased. It went from 3.2 in September to 3.4 to 3.5. So there is a trend that we look at carefully. A lot of that is related, based on the staff study, is related to wages. And wages have surprised us to the upside. If we look at compensation per employee, for instance, we are at 4%, which is more than had been anticipated, in particular in the September projections. So with wage having increased more than anticipated and being a strong contributor to most activities of services, not all of them, but most activities of services, it's hardly surprising that services inflation is higher than anticipated and contributing to the current inflation number that we have. It's balanced out by goods, as you will have seen in the monetary policy statement, is they go in opposite directions. Goods go down, services increase, and we anticipate two things in relation to that. Number one, that wages will follow a slightly declining trend going forward, and we have wages slightly below 3% at the end of 26. And that is based on measurements instruments that we have, whether it's the wage tracker, which incorporates all the negotiated, the collective bargaining agreement that are negotiated and which roll out into either 1 or 2 or 3 years, depending on the countries, and under which we cover now 8 countries with quite a large number of employees, workers, or whether it is the surveys and the corporate telephone survey that we conduct asking, corporates, where do you see salaries, where do you see wages, how are the negotiations going? So on the basis of all that, we believe that this compensation per employee should decline in the course of 26. But we are attentive, because while we believe that a lot of the catch-up, for instance, has taken place, a lot of the one-off specific payments have occurred, we were surprised between September and December in our projection, and that is reflected in our numbers. So we are humble. We look at as many details and data, and we look at the vacancy, of course, to see what's likely to happen. We look at PMI numbers, but that's where we are, and it's a big contributor to services. And we have, because this is one that we really debated quite a bit and that we looked into, and that staff is working really hard to get to the bottom of it. Services is a big package. You have lots of things in there. You have accommodation, transportation, telecom, IT, financial services. There's a lot in there. And some of those subsectors of services are labor intensive, are wage intensive, others less so. So we have to sort of balance out and distribute the wage increases that we expect in between all that. But there is really a solid work done in that respect. So your question is, can a sitting member of the executive board be eligible for another board position or the position of president of the executive board? This matter was looked at in the past. It was looked at when Christian Noyer, the then vice president of the ECB, was possibly considered for presidency. It was looked at for Benoît Cœuré, who was then an executive board member and who was also considered possibly for the replacement of Mario Draghi. I think in both those instances, the determination by the jurists, the lawyers of various corners of Europe was that it was not possible. But I think the matter needs to be looked at again in order to ascertain, what is possible, what is not possible, what are the conditions. And it's not for me to pass a judgment on that. I think it needs to be cleared so that everyone knows where to stand.
The next question goes to Isabella Bufacchi of Il Sole 24 Ore. Isabella, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. President Lagarde, I have two questions on financial stability, as it was also mentioned on the statement. So financial stability and the international role of the euro could be threatened by the reparations law for Ukraine using the cash balance of Russia's asset. However, so far, the euro has been quite resilient in spite of Putin's retaliation threats. So what is your assessment of this kind of resilience of the euro so far in this respect? And also on financial stability and the digital euro project, which is making progress. The council orientation these days is a milestone, and the digital euro is viewed more and more as an anchor to strengthen financial stability in the euro area. So, in your opinion, could the ECB become a role model in the world to assess the importance of central bank digital currencies? Thank you.
I think I'll start with your second question. I know these are important moments for the digital euro because we have done our work, we have carried the water, but it's now for the European Council and certainly later on for the European Parliament to identify whether the Commission proposal is satisfactory, how it can be transformed into a piece of legislation or amended. Our ambition is not to be role models. Our ambition is to make sure that in the digital age, there is a currency that is the anchor of stability for the financial system. For the moment, that anchor is central bank money, which essentially has material form. It's the banknotes that you have in your wallet. But in the digital age, it has to be a digital expression of that sovereignty and a digital anchor for the purpose of the financial system that we have. So that's what we're pursuing, in addition to making sure that it is user-friendly, not costly, fast, efficient, private, that it can work online, offline. I mean, I could go on and on because you know that I've followed that very carefully with my Italian colleagues, and both Luis and myself are very strong supporters of this initiative, and we place great hopes in the work that will be done in Parliament once the Council has made its view, has determined its views. You know, on the other topic that you raised, I'm not going to expand on this matter because it's something that is under review, that is under work at the moment, which is of the competence of the European leaders and which is the expression of foreign policy. So it's not for a central bank to have either political views or central bank's choice as to what is appropriate or not appropriate. Our job, and we are trying to do it as much and as well as we can at the odd hours of the day or the weekend, is to respond to the request that are put upon us to determine that whatever choice is made by the leaders is going to respect the treaty, is going to respect the international rule of law, and will not damage financial stability. This is the remit of what is our duty. Beyond that, it's something that is outside our remit. Thank you.
And now Jan Malin of Plato. Jan, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Madame Lagarde, I have a follow-up question on your first comment about the changing growth profile and due to AI. Isabel Schnabel made a similar comment in her interview with Bloomberg, where she said that the natural interest rate might rise because of that. Do you agree with that assessment? And my second question is on stable coins. They have gained significant importance globally, but many experts see this as a threat to Europe's monetary sovereignty and are calling for stronger support for stable coins in Europe as well. What's your position on that? Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to clarify your second question. You don't say that the digital euro is a threat to sovereignty. You said stable coins, right?
Stable coins,
okay,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I had misunderstood.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
My mistake. So we are lucky in Europe to have something that is called MiCAR. So it's the legal framework within which instruments like stable coins can work and can be supervised and can be regarded as safe. So our view is that an instrument that is in compliance with MiCAR is an alternative form of payment, which might have its benefit, might have a business case for those that issue the stable coins. My concern, because I have a concern, so that's, to the extent that it conforms to MiCAR, that it is properly organized, that it has the right one-to-one guarantee for the users, I don't need to have a view. Supervisors need to have a view. Those who control that there is actually the reserve. Where I have a concern is when you have something that is getting a bit technical now, if we go there, is the situation of multi-issuance currency for stable coins. Because without going into the details of how it is structured, it exposes the reserves, the resolution mechanisms, and the redemption mechanism in Europe, as is organized under MiCAR, to other currencies under which the stablecoin would be issued, and which could be a threat and a drain on the provisions of MiCAR that apply in Europe. So on that particular area, I think that we need to be extremely attentive to what the potential risks are for the system itself and for the holders of stable coins. On your first question, look, I'm not going to agonize over the issue of, where and how is the R star and the rate which is ideal because it neither stimulates nor restricts our economies. There are multiple factors that can affect it. Productivity is obviously one of them. If we draw a lot of productivity out of artificial intelligence, it will impact. But there are multiple other factors as well that will impact R star. And one of the characteristics of R star is that you can only sort of identify it eventually in completely stable circumstances. I don't think that we can call the current circumstances as perfectly stable and predictable. There is, as I said earlier, too much uncertainty, too much risks, and too many shocks under the spell of which we still are to actually identify R star and have a view as to whether it's going to increase. So, as I said, it's not observable, so to speak, and I think it's a very good debate to have, but I'm not sure that this is the one that has caught the attention of the Governing Council. It's certainly not one that we debated today, or yesterday for that matter.
And the last question goes to Philippe Lacour of AFP. Jean-Philippe.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Bonjour, Monsieur Lacour.
Switch in English, of course. I have two questions on the same issue, if I may. It's related to Ukraine. You know that in these hours, the 27 head of states meet in Brussels with a bold agenda. And one of the points is to try to agree on this reparation plan for Ukraine. So single question is, are you confident that they will succeed to find a solution? And the second one is, earlier this month, yes, ECB said we cannot provide a backstop for, to use the frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine. Simple reason, it would likely breach the treaty, prohibiting monetary financing is the other point. But in these several times, shouldn't the overriding interest of the people of Ukraine to have the right to rebuild their country and live in peace not come above all kind of purely factual legal considerations? And as you said before, for the case of Mrs. Schnabel, would it be possible to maybe look at it again, if the question is again raised? Because, I mean, there is overriding interests of the people of Ukraine that may be, above the pure legal considerations. So I would like to have your point on this.
Well, thank you for your question. Your first question, there is work going on at the moment. Again, it's not our remit, it's for the leaders to decide. And given the importance of the matter, given what is at stake, I am fully confident that they will find a solution. It might be in the usual European way, going in circles and being time-consuming and giving rise to a lot of speculation as to whether it will work, it will not work, there will be one camp or the other. But I'm confident that they will find a solution because it's too important. We are an area of the world which praise itself for respecting the rule of law. And this is one of the characteristics of our democracy. The leaders will decide, okay? And I'm sure that there are solutions that can be debated and discussed, and there are constructions that can be elaborated. But it is not for the central bank to actually encourage or support a mechanism under which we would be called upon and scheduled to breach Article 123 of the treaty. This is monetary financing is not allowed under the treaty. You cannot expect me to validate ex ante a mechanism under which there would be monetary financing. This is pretty obvious. Thank you. And if there is no more questions, then I'm happy to wish you all a Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever is convenient, to those of you who celebrate or don't celebrate. And we look forward to seeing you in the new year, bright and ready and still determined to deliver on our mandate and get to our target. And I'm sure you've got other plans than me.
The next meeting is on the 5th of February, by the way, the next press conference.
Muy bien, comencemos. Hemos pues llegado al final, al último panel de esta conferencia. El debate político de ayer versó sobre los escollos prácticos y políticos asociados al gasto en defensa. En esta sesión vamos a ofrecer una perspectiva ligeramente diferente sobre los impactos macroeconómicos y fiscales del gasto desde una perspectiva diferente. Tenemos dos ponencias. La primera la presentará Jonathan, que la analizará y la segunda la presentará y enviará a alguien que la analizará. Sin más preámbulos, Jonathan.
Muchas gracias por la introducción y por invitarme. En general, me complace mucho presentar esta ponencia, El precio de la guerra, que es un trabajo conjunto con André Maya, Ganut Müller, Much y Murik. Empecemos. ¿Cuál es el problema? Bueno, el problema es que vivimos en una nueva era marcada por el aumento de las tensiones geopolíticas y las guerras declaradas que estallan abiertamente. Sorprendentemente limitada es nuestra comprensión de las consecuencias macroeconómicas de las guerras. En este contexto escribimos este documento que responde a dos preguntas. La primera es, ¿cuál es el impacto macroeconómico de la guerra? Hay dos canales de primer orden en los que uno puede pensar cuando piensa en las guerras. Uno, la acumulación militar, que generalmente se asocia con las guerras que tienen efectos expansivos. Y el segundo es la muerte y la destrucción, que también se asocian típicamente con las guerras y que generalmente se describen como contractivas. Reconciliamos estos dos canales distinguiendo en nuestro análisis entre diferentes tipos de partes interesadas en la guerra. Los beligerantes, que son los países que participan en cada guerra, pero también los lugares de guerra, que no solo participan en la guerra, sino que en realidad son ese subconjunto de beligerantes que se enfrentan a la destrucción material y la violencia en su propio territorio. La segunda pregunta que respondemos es, ¿qué pasa con los demás países? Aquí entra en juego el tercer actor, los terceros países que no participan en la guerra en absoluto. Y mostramos que, de hecho, estos también se enfrentan a importantes efectos secundarios económicos adversos de la guerra. Y para ilustrarles por qué este es un tema tan importante, les traemos este gráfico que básicamente muestra la frecuencia con la que se han librado guerras en los últimos 150 años. Las barras moradas les indican el número de lugares de guerra de aquellos países que realmente sufrieron destrucción en su propio territorio, y las barras rojas les indican los países vecinos de los lugares de guerra, es decir, aquellos países que comparten una frontera común con lugares de guerra. Lo que pueden ver es que la probabilidad incondicional de ser un combatiente de guerra en un año determinado es de 6%, la probabilidad de estar expuesto geográficamente a un lugar de guerra es del 20% mal. Lo que sugiere que la exposición a una guerra en el extranjero es más bien la norma que la excepción, ya que ocurre con una frecuencia de ciclo económico. Nuestro análisis empírico se basa en nuevos datos de todas las guerras interestatales, intraestatales y extranjeras desde 1870. Realizamos análisis separados para las guerras interestatales que se caracterizan por enfrentamientos entre dos o más estados reconocidos. Y otras guerras que utilizamos como categoría resumen para las guerras intraestatales y extranjeras. Piensen en las guerras civiles y las guerras de independencia. Una nueva contribución de este conjunto de datos es que geolocalizamos los lugares de guerra de todas estas guerras, es decir, identificamos dónde tuvieron lugar los combates y además, en el caso de las guerras interestatales, identificamos narrativamente el origen de los conflictos, que es la razón por la que se iniciaron estas guerras, lo que es clave para su posterior identificación. Con estos datos estimamos la respuesta dinámica, la respuesta a la Guerra Media, y descubrimos que en los escenarios de guerra el PIB cae hasta un 10% y los precios al consumo aumentan alrededor de un 20%. En cuanto a los efectos indirectos en terceros países, descubrimos que dependen fundamentalmente de la integración comercial de esos terceros países con respecto a los escenarios de guerra. Por tanto, si observamos un tercer país que no está integrado en absoluto y que no importa ningún bien de los escenarios de guerra, vemos que la producción se mantiene estable y los precios solo aumentan moderadamente. A su vez, si observamos el escenario contrafáctico de una guerra de un tercer país que importa el 3%, cuyas importaciones de los escenarios de guerra representan el 3% de su PIB anterior a la guerra. Aquí vemos que la producción cae un 2%, los precios suben un 3%. No voy a dedicar mucho tiempo a hablar de la literatura solo para ahorrar tiempo. Iré directamente a los datos y los resultados en los... ¿Cómo llegamos a estos resultados? Tenemos datos nuevos, tenemos tres tipos diferentes de conjuntos de datos, tenemos resultados macroeconómicos de hasta 60 países a partir de 1870. Observamos la producción, la inflación, el capital social, la PTF, los tipos de interés, los rendimientos de las acciones, así como el personal militar. Y el gasto que obtenemos de fuentes bastante estándar. Y para identificar los efectos moderadores del comercio en terceros países, utilizamos datos del CEPI. En el centro mismo de nuestro análisis, como ya mencioné en la introducción, están los datos sobre los lugares de guerra. Identificamos estos lugares de guerra en 2 pasos, básicamente. En el primer paso, consultamos todas las bases de datos que contienen datos sobre guerras y sus participantes, como el proyecto Correlates of War y el UCDP, para identificar todas las guerras y los países que participaron en ellas. En el segundo paso, geolocalizamos los lugares de guerra. Hacemos esto para guerras interestatales que suelen ser muy complejas, ya que involucran a muchos países con líneas de frente bastante diferenciadas geográficamente. Hacemos esto desagregándolas a nivel de batalla. Es decir, identificamos todas las batallas que se libraron en estas guerras, las geolocalizamos y luego recopilamos para cada una de esas batallas el número de muertos, desaparecidos o heridos, es decir, las bajas, y las agregamos a nivel de país utilizando las aguas actuales. Luego definimos la gravedad de estas guerras como las bajas sufridas durante toda la duración de la guerra en relación con la población local anterior a la guerra. Esta es la gravedad para el país local en el que se libra la guerra. Para otras guerras básicamente hacemos lo mismo, excepto por la desagregación a nivel de batalla, simplemente porque normalmente están contenidas geográficamente en 1 o 2 países. Si piensas, por ejemplo, en la mayoría de las guerras civiles. Los lugares de guerra resultantes se resumen en esta tabla. En el panel A se pueden ver las guerras interestatales, en el panel B las otras guerras y en el panel C la muestra combinada que forma nuestro análisis de referencia y que comprende 694 emplazamientos de guerra diferentes. Tenemos series temporales macroeconómicas para 220 de estos emplazamientos, para 319 beligerantes, es decir, partes en la guerra que no se enfrentan a la destrucción material en su antiguo territorio. Pensemos de nuevo en Estados Unidos en el contexto de las guerras mundiales en comparación con Francia. Y tenemos datos sobre 7.000 terceros países. Para que os hagáis una idea de cómo se distribuye la gravedad de estas guerras, aquí tenéis un gráfico que las resume. No estoy seguro de si es muy bueno, se ve muy bien ahí, pero el eje y muestra básicamente las bajas en relación con la población local. Así que la gravedad y el eje X muestran los años en los que se libraron las guerras, y esta es la línea más grande aquí. Así que esta guerra interestatal con la mayor gravedad fue Eslovenia en el contexto de la Primera Guerra Mundial, que se enfrentó a una serie de batallas especialmente sangrientas, sobre todo a lo largo del Frente de Santo. También vemos que la guerra de la isla Flandes fue particularmente grave, simplemente porque si piensas en cómo se construye esta medida, son las bajas en relación con la población local. Si tienes a Argentina y al Reino Unido luchando en las Islas Flandes, que tiene un denominador muy, muy pequeño aquí, terminarás con una guerra muy grave en términos de destrucción local. Bueno, ahora permítanme mostrarles un último gráfico descriptivo que ya alude a lo que encontramos en nuestro estudio más riguroso más adelante. El gráfico es básicamente un diagrama de dispersión de contenedores que relaciona en el eje X la reducción máxima de 5 años en el seguimiento del inicio de una guerra, con la medida de gravedad en el eje Y. Y lo que podemos ver es que, aparentemente, el deterioro de la producción, entonces la contracción de la producción, depende de forma bastante lineal de la gravedad de la guerra dentro de los sitios de guerra. Pero ahora establezcamos esto en un entorno más riguroso. Y para este propósito presentamos un conjunto de proyecciones locales. Aquí lo que hacemos es relacionar un conjunto de variables de resultados macroeconómicos como la producción o la inflación en valores relativos al año anterior al conflicto durante años, con un conjunto de controles. Estos incluyen efectos fijos de país, así como 4 relaciones de la variable dependiente en primeras diferencias, así como de los regresores y nuestros términos de choque bélico. Estos términos de choque bélico buscan capturar el efecto promedio que las guerras tienen en 3 partes interesadas diferentes. Los sitios de guerra S, la beligerancia B y los terceros países T. Estimamos 3 coeficientes diferentes aquí. ¿Cómo responden los países a las guerras? Este coeficiente SI aquí se basa en la interacción de gamma y sitios. Los sitios no son más que nuestro vector de choque. Es un vector que comprende todos los países que tenemos en nuestra muestra y que solo toma valores distintos de 0 en las filas específicas en las que los países comienzan a convertirse en un sitio de guerra en un año determinado. Y en este año toma el valor de la gravedad de las guerras. Pensemos en un escenario en el que el país K se convierte en un escenario de guerra en el año T. Entonces, la fila K de los lados T sería igual a la gravedad de la guerra en K. Ahora bien, si solo contáramos con el término de choque, no podríamos hacer mucho, porque solo con el término de choque sabemos dónde se han librado todas las guerras del mundo, pero no sabemos cómo se han librado otros países o qué tipo de partes interesadas son otros países en relación con estas guerras. Para ello, hemos introducido este otro vector gamma aquí, que se asigna de forma efectiva a un vector de variables ficticias que asigna si el país primero es un escenario beligerante o un tercer país en relación con cada guerra que se captura en los escenarios. Y de esta forma podemos estimar el efecto medio de las guerras extranjeras para las diferentes partes interesadas. Pero aún no hemos terminado, porque ahora solo tenemos una carga de coeficientes sobre el efecto medio de la guerra, sin tener en cuenta la importancia del escenario de la guerra. Por tanto, si solo tuviéramos que estimar en realidad atribuiríamos una guerra con una gravedad del 3% de la población local en Liechtenstein a la misma que una en Estados Unidos o en China a la... Y para este propósito introdujimos el segundo término aquí, donde efectivamente tenemos una variable que es muy similar a gamma, pero que ya no toma el valor de 0 y 1 en el caso de que estalle una guerra, sino que toma una medida de peso, por así decirlo. ¿Qué importancia tiene el bando en guerra para el resto del mundo? Y en nuestra línea de base aquí, donde medimos el efecto promedio, esto es simplemente la población del bando en guerra en relación con la población mundial. Y cuando estimamos la especificación, podemos rastrear los efectos dinámicos que tienen las guerras de cierta gravedad y cierta importancia del lugar de la guerra. Así que aquí tenemos el tamaño promedio del bando en guerra representado, que es el 3% de la población mundial, y el 2% de las bajas en relación con la población local. Y lo que pueden ver es que vemos una respuesta clara de la producción y la inflación en los lugares de la guerra, con una producción que va un 10% por detrás, casi por detrás de la tendencia, y los precios al consumidor suben un 20%. Ahora bien, también les dije que no solo estamos observando al tercer país promedio en guerra, también queremos saber cómo responden en función de su visado de integración comercial frente al lugar de la guerra. Para ello, podemos redefinir este mapeador epsilon para que ya no capture el peso demográfico del lugar de la guerra, sino que capture ahora un peso económico, y en particular un peso económico bilateral. De este modo, cada valor en epsilon ya no denota el tamaño de los lados, sino que denotará las importaciones bilaterales de cualquier país del lado de la guerra en relación con el PBI del país primero antes de la guerra. Cuando graficamos la respuesta de la producción y la inflación, llegamos a esta imagen, la línea discontinua. A azul, aquí nos muestra el escenario en el que el tercer país no importa ningún bien de los lugares de la guerra. Y la línea continua roja nos muestra el escenario en el que las importaciones de los lugares de la guerra corresponden al 3% del PIB antes de la guerra del tercer país. Como pueden ver, la producción se contrae drásticamente y los precios también aumentan para el país expuesto, pero no para el otro. Lo mismo ocurre con los beligerantes, aunque un poco más. Cuando volvemos a observar la respuesta de las exportaciones e importaciones en sí mismas, las respuestas promedio en los sitios de guerra, beligerantes y terceros países, vemos que en los terceros países, y la beligerancia, en los terceros países y los sitios de guerra, las exportaciones, así como las importaciones, parecen disminuir a largo plazo. Y en el caso de los beligerantes, las exportaciones también disminuyeron, aunque inicialmente las exportaciones aumentaron para los beligerantes. Aunque lo que descubrimos es que cuando eliminamos las guerras mundiales de nuestra muestra, esta respuesta positiva para la beligerancia se apodera. Lo que sugiere, en nuestra opinión, que estos efectos positivos de las exportaciones en la beligerancia se deben principalmente a guerras mundiales muy complejas que implican una logística compleja entre los sitios de guerra y los beligerantes. Esto también puede ser responsable del ligero repunte que vemos aquí en las importaciones en los sitios de guerra. En el caso de los terceros países, también vemos el mismo patrón que aquellos que están expuestos a través de vínculos comerciales con el bando de la guerra. Ven menores exportaciones e importaciones. Por cierto, estos siempre están en puntos porcentuales del PIB anterior a la guerra. También observamos una serie de otros resultados, por ejemplo, en el capital social y la productividad total de los factores, donde nuevamente surge el patrón de que los peores bandos parecen estar peor, lo cual parece bastante natural. También observamos las tasas de interés a largo plazo, así como los índices de rentabilidad de las acciones y el gasto militar y el personal militar. Lo interesante aquí es que esta es la única cifra de respuesta donde realmente vemos la misma respuesta de los sitios de guerra y los beligerantes, lo cual tiene sentido desde la perspectiva de que los beligerantes también participan en combates probablemente en la misma proporción que los sitios de guerra. En cuanto a la solidez, observamos varias cosas aquí. Entonces, excluimos las guerras mundiales de forma conjunta y por separado. Empleamos medidas de gravedad alternativas. Restringimos la muestra a guerras más cortas y más largas y muchas otras cosas. Otra evidencia que encontramos interesante fue que descubrimos que las guerras también conducen a un deterioro de las instituciones democráticas, particularmente en los sitios de guerra. Entonces, vemos un declive de la independencia judicial, la libertad de los medios de comunicación y las instituciones en general Observamos a los ganadores y perdedores y parece que en las guerras interestatales todos pierden económicamente, pero parece que los perdedores de la guerra pierden más que los ganadores. Así que eso resume bastante bien esa respuesta. Y también observamos a los vecinos en guerra y cómo reaccionan además de los vínculos comerciales. Y la idea aquí es que los vecinos en guerra se enfrentan a un riesgo no trivial de que el conflicto se expanda y por lo tanto también de que se deterioren las inversiones y los rendimientos del capital, el que es lo que encontramos. Permítanme dedicar los últimos minutos a hablar un poco sobre la causalidad, porque al menos en el caso de las otras guerras, es difícil establecer la causalidad. Yo diría que sobre todo cuando observamos, por ejemplo, los episodios recientes en Haití, que también fueron provocados en parte por el aumento de los precios del petróleo, etc. Todos tenemos algunas anécdotas en mente con respecto a cómo la guerra en sí misma se ha visto o puede haber sido influenciada por consideraciones económicas a corto plazo. En el caso de las guerras interestatales, esto es un poco diferente. Por lo tanto, no vemos ningún efecto de anticipación ni en el crecimiento ni en la inflación que preceda a las guerras interestatales. Esto es coherente con los supuestos típicos de la literatura sobre política fiscal en la que el gasto militar tiende a utilizarse como instrumento del gasto fiscal. Pero también hay algunas pruebas en contrario. Por ejemplo, hay algunos estudios que han demostrado que al parecer es más probable que entre en guerra, siempre que esté en recesión, y el presidente se presente a la reelección. ¿Qué hacemos para reconciliar estas opiniones contradictorias de la literatura? Realizamos un análisis narrativo siguiendo el espíritu de Roma y Rohr, en el que clasificamos el casus belli para todas las guerras interestatales de nuestra muestra. Ahora nos movemos en el subconjunto de guerras, que son solo guerras interestatales entre varios estados. Y para todas ellas queremos averiguar si estaban motivadas por consideraciones económicas a corto plazo. Y elaboramos 8 categorías no excluyentes para las guerras que se han iniciado. La más común es el nacionalismo, con 57 guerras en nuestra muestra, seguido de las transiciones de poder y los dilemas de seguridad. Sin embargo, también encontramos 6 guerras en las que al menos no pudimos excluir que las consideraciones económicas a corto plazo desempeñaron un papel significativo en su estallido. Otra es la guerra turca de Talat, que fue precedida por una gran inmigración masiva y que algunas fuentes también a motivos políticos internos de distracción a corto plazo para desviar al público de la recesión en curso. Cuando vamos a estimar nuestra muestra sobre la narrativa del subconjunto de guerras interestatales identificadas narrativamente, llegamos a conclusiones muy similares a las que obtuvimos en nuestra línea de base. Y me gustaría enfatizar que nuestra línea de base no está impulsada por las guerras interestatales. Incluso si restringimos la muestra a las otras guerras que son completamente ortogonales a lo que mostramos aquí en la muestra, llegamos a conclusiones similares. Lo mismo ocurre con terceros países, aunque Por supuesto, observamos bandas de confianza, de significancia, algo más amplias porque simplemente descartamos 2/3 de nuestros tratamientos. Advertir sobre una cosa al abordar la causalidad aquí. Lo que hicimos ahora fue excluir que lo que observamos antes de la guerra sea lo que la impulsa e intentamos lo mejor que pudimos para recurrir a fuentes narrativas para asegurarnos de que realmente no se iniciaron por estas razones. Sin embargo, no es perfectamente observable que realmente no hubo consideraciones económicas en juego. Por ejemplo, un país también puede ir a la guerra porque anticipa un desarrollo económico futuro en su adversario. Esto es algo que no hemos comprobado. Creemos que esto no está en juego aquí en función de nuestra lectura, pero no podemos excluir al 100% la posibilidad de que esto desempeñe un papel aquí. Pero algunas pruebas que tenemos a este respecto también en un proyecto de seguimiento son, por ejemplo, que observamos los rendimientos de las acciones que suelen ser prospectivos y que tampoco ven un deterioro antes del inicio de estas guerras. Bueno, creo que voy a concluir antes. ¿Qué hemos hecho? Hemos analizado el impacto macroeconómico de la guerra. Encontramos grandes efectos adversos en los escenarios de guerra y descubrimos que los socios comerciales en los escenarios de guerra también pagan un precio sustancial. En cuanto al mecanismo, teníamos un poco más sobre el mecanismo en versiones anteriores del documento que también incluían un modelo de economía abierta bastante estándar que racionalizaba estos patrones. Aquí nuestras conclusiones fueron que había una perturbación de la oferta que dominaba en el lado de la guerra y que se extendía a terceros países a través de una escasez de insumos intermedios. En cuanto a la beligerancia, descubrimos que estos efectos también pueden verse compensados en parte por los efectos expansivos del gasto militar. Y creemos que estos hallazgos tienen perspectivas o relevancia particularmente importantes en el contexto de la política monetaria porque, como también pueden ver en las cifras que tenemos, estamos tratando aquí con perturbaciones adversas de la oferta muy grandes y muy persistentes, que son diferentes en una región geográfica o en diferentes países, lo que supone un desafío particular para las uniones monetarias. Muchas gracias.
Ahora tenemos acá que analizará el documento. Gracias, Jonathan.
Gracias. Bueno, en primer lugar, gracias por invitarme a debatir sobre